All right, now for the exciting stuff. I am so happy to introduce the speaker for our next session, titled Design That Delivers, Enhancing Customer Experience Through Universal Design. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Norton, a learning development and training specialist with the Washington State Department of Licensing. Sarah is deeply committed to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, and also serves as co chair of the Disability Inclusion Network, helping to promote disability equity across state agencies. With a background in psychology and library science, Sarah blends human centered design thinking with research based insight to remove barriers and foster inclusion in the workplace. Outside of work, she's an avid reader, a weekend explorer, and a proud aunt. She's always up for a good sci fi story, a new travel adventure, or a conversation about her favorite movie, The Fifth Element. We are in for a very informative session, so without further ado, I present to you Ms. Sarah Norton.
Hello, hello, everyone. Give me just a moment here to share my screen. Um, Give me just a second. Hopefully, that should have popped up for everyone. All right, I see some nodding from folks who are able to let me see their camera. So, thank you. And again, I'm just so excited to see so many of you here today. Thank you all for making time to come to Design That Delivers, enhancing customer experience through universal design. I'm going to be hitting you with a lot of information. So don't worry if you don't remember it all. The slide deck is already available on the conference website. When you go there, one side says register, another side says archives, and all the presentations for this year that are available are already up. So you can find my slides there. All right. So I want to quickly introduce a little bit about me, more than just my bio, just so everyone here knows that I'm actually really a real person. So my name is Sarah Norton. So what I just signed was my name is Sarah Norton, and my name sign is the letter R with both hands, right hand above the left, pulled down from my ear towards my shoulder to indicate my braided pigtails. I am a white female with naturally rosy red cheeks. I have long, dark brown braided pigtails. Now, usually I have natural silver highlights, but actually today I have purple hair. I have clear plastic framed glasses, and I am wearing a black t shirt that says accessibility is a human right. I also have on a headset, so I look a little like a telemarketer. So if I start talking about a timeshare or an extended car warranty, just steer me back on topic. Now, I like to share some of my disabilities so folks understand some of my own lived experiences, and because I sometimes share examples from my own life during my presentations. So, I am multiply neurodivergent. This means that my brain processes the world around me differently than the majority of people's. I have Tourette syndrome, I'm autistic, ADHD, I have OCD, anxiety, auditory and sensory processing disorders. It's kind of a package deal with me, is what I like to say. As was mentioned, I am a huge bookworm. I love to not only read, but I love to collect books. My favorite genres, science fiction and fictional murder mysteries. I don't go much for the true crime. And a few of my favorite books are Ender's Game, House of Leaves, The Great Gatsby, The Giver, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Death on the Nile. And I'm just pausing a moment so Kelly can catch up. All right. I am also physically disabled. I have psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, and migraines. Oh, and my favorite dinosaur, as mentioned, is the Triceratops. Yeah. All right. So that's just a brief little bit about me, but let's go moving on into the topic while we're all here. So, in the topic description on the website, there is a list of a lot of formal learning objectives. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I do want to highlight what the overall goal is of our time here together. What I hope all of you can leave here being able to say. And that is, I hope by about 3:50 or 4 p.m. ish, you can all say confidently, I can apply the principles of universal design with creating or improving existing systems, processes, procedures, environments, and so on. So let's start with some important terms and concepts, just so we all have a little bit of a baseline. This will also help in understanding the connection between accessibility and equity to customer trust, loyalty, and satisfaction. So, a customer. A customer is either a person or a business that purchases goods or services, or is a consumer of a product or a service. Now, customers can be external, the public who come to you, or they can be internal, right? Other employees. For example, human resources professionals. Many of their customers are going to be internal, right? They're going to be other employees at the agency or the company. But there's also folks in HR, such as talent acquisition, for government folks, labor and investigation, anyone who does bargaining. They're going to have a lot of external clients. Also, IT roles might have internal client customers, helping employees set up their workstations, resetting passwords. Not sure who in here might be doing IT, but I hear that is a favorite task of everybody in IT. Things like doing security audits. And then, of course, there could be external. Maybe you work on the external websites. You follow up on reports of vendors. You follow up on reports of issues, or you work with vendors. Right? Another term is accessibility, right? And this is when you can independently interact with your environment without needing another person to help you. Now, independently means you might have assistive technology, but it means that you don't need another human being always to step in and help, right? So, for example, you can go to a website and find the information you need on your own. And you also don't need to contact the company and have them make changes to the website. Or you can enter a building and make your way to the fourth floor without needing a ramp to be built, elevators to be installed, or another person to help open doors or call the elevator. And then equity. Equity is fairness and justice. Equity is not equality, right? Equality is when everyone gets the exact same thing. Equity is when we all get what we need to have the same experience. So, a quick example. So, for equality, say, I want us all to have the experience of wearing comfortable, matching t shirts. I'm a huge fan of matching outfits, by the way. So, if I'm being equal, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy everyone a medium pullover short sleeve t shirt. Now, for some people, that's going to be great. They'll be comfortable in it. Others might need a smaller or a larger size. They might want long sleeves. They might need no sleeves. Maybe they need a button or a zip up instead of a pullover. But equality is doesn't matter. You all get that shirt. Now, equity is when I give everyone the type of shirt they can wear and be comfortable in. So the size, the length, whether it's a pullover or a button up, those are unique to each person's needs, but we all get to have the same experience of being in those comfortable matching shirts. So equity is what we are talking about. And now the next three terms are related to our customers and how they feel about us as service providers. So the first one is customer trust. Trust is the confidence the customer has in your ability to fulfill your promise and commitments, right? Are you doing what you say you're doing? Does the service or product you provide do what it say it does? Do your employees treat the customers the way you tell the customers they're going to be treated, right? Do you respond to them in the amount of time you say you will, right? That's how you gain their trust. Now, customer loyalty, this is the commitment the customer makes to stay your customer. Now, we hope this is for a long time. We also understand that, especially in government services, sometimes our customers have no choice. I work for Department of Licensing. There is only one place in Washington you can get your driver's license. So they're loyal to us, whether they want to be or not, but we want them to, not dread coming to us. Same with any government agency. And then even businesses, sometimes there isn't a competitor in the area that you provide. And then customer satisfaction is how much the service and products meet and we hope exceed the customer's expectations. And so these three are inexplicably tied. Apologies. I'm not going to go over all the research out there, but there is a lot of research showing that these are tied. So, quick example, you work in a call center where customers call in to ask questions about the status of an order or a claim. They're calling and asking you about what's going on with something. Now, your agency or your company promises to provide respectful, helpful, and polite service. So a customer calls in. Now, their questions are all answered, and it's even an answer they want to hear. But the employee, by the third question, they sigh heavily, they give very short, clipped answers, and they're really just irritated in their replies. So the customer is going to lose trust, right? Because we're promising them respectful, polite service, and they're not getting it. Okay? So they're not going to have much trust. They're not going to be very satisfied. So they're not going to be very loyal to us, right? So that's how these three are tied. The last concept to go over real quick is something called the curb cut effect. This explains how something that was created for people with disabilities has a positive effect on all people. So curb cuts are when the sidewalk slopes down at an intersection or parking lot, right? It was designed for people who use wheelchairs to get off the curb and into the parking lot or across the street and onto the other curb. But how many of us have used this at the grocery store to get our shopping cart into the parking lot? Or maybe we had a stroller, right? So designed for somebody with a disability positively affects everybody. On this slide, there's a list of different things that all kind of meet this effect. Elevators and escalators, doors, voice to text or text to voice. Right? How many of you use that in the car when a text comes in and it reads it out loud? Providing training in multiple formats, closed captioning, having breaks in meetings over an hour and a half, sending out meeting agendas ahead of time, meeting notes sent out, plain language version of policies. These might be developed for people with disabilities, but they really help all people. Okay, so let's talk about why accessibility is smart business, right? Because when we understand why accessibility is smart business, it allows us to advocate for changes in to our own leaders in our workplace. And also how these inclusive service practices support those broader organizational goals like return on investment, employee engagement, and recruitment and retention. So let's talk about the financial benefits, right? What's the financial benefit of accessibility? So, prioritizing accessibility. Research shows that when companies prioritize accessibility, they have 1.6 times higher revenue, 2.6 times higher net income, and 2 times higher net profit. They also see a 60% increase in customer loyalty. And loyal customers are not only return customers, but they tell their friends. Now, just a few years ago, the global disability market and recent estimate was about $18 trillion. And this has only grown since that estimate a few years ago. Another thing to note is that 92% of customers have a more favorable perception of a company if they hire people with disabilities, right? Another way to save money is building accessibility from the start. Think about building a house. So often, many of us would get a loan to cover the cost of building the house, right? Now, let's imagine this is going to be your forever home. This is where you're going to grow old and retire. Now, when you build the house, the builder says if you want to build a ramp, right? up to your house, it's going to be about $1,500 to $5,000. Depends on the size and the length and all of that. And you think, well, I don't need a ramp. So why would I have that added into the loan, right? Let's save that money. But now imagine it's 10 years later. Now you have an elderly family member moving in with you who needs a ramp. You still have your house payment. Your taxes and utilities have only gone up. You now have two car payments, and your three kids are in what seems like 15 sports that all have an astronomical amount of dues. And now suddenly you need to come up with up to $5,000 or $6,000 to add that ramp onto your house. In hindsight, having it added on when building is probably the more affordable option. It's the same with our workplaces. We never know who's going to be, quote unquote, coming in our doors, right? And we don't know when an employee is suddenly going to need a ramp or a paddle button or plain language policies or procedures. So creating accessibility from the beginning saves you time, resources, money, right? So all those reasons. It also leads to higher employee engagement, which we also know has a financial impact, right? When we keep employees, we don't have to invest the same amount in recruiting and initial hiring. There is a direct link between supervisor support and transformational leadership and employee engagement and well-being. You think, well, how is transformational leadership accessibility? Well, it has multiple components, but in this setting, we're looking at when leaders pay attention to employees' achievement and development, when they have empathy and compassion, and they provide the support and the guidance, right? These are all things that improve accessibility. Transformational leaders understand the unique needs of each employee and provide support for each person, right? It's that equity. Everybody gets what they need to have the same experience. Research also shows that an employee's perception of the work environment related to ethics directly ties to the employee's trust in the organization. Now, we talked about customer trust, but employee trust leads to higher engagement. And if we're wondering about, well, ethics, what is, all of that, accessibility is ethical. Let's just leave it at that. So when we are accessible or ethical, our employees have a more positive perception. They're going to stay with us and stay engaged. Oh, I apologize. So higher engagement also leads to increased productivity, better citizenship behaviors in the workplace. Another word for this is respect, right? It leads to increased overall performance and increased retention. And who doesn't want that? So I hope by now these slides have helped you understand, more benefits of creating with accessibility in mind from the beginning. Now, of course, if you have things that aren't accessible, it's not too late to change them. You just go in and take a look. For those of you who were in our last session, they realized that a certain process wasn't working. And so they kind of paused, took stock of everything, and changed it. So now let's talk about the real reason we're here, that universal design. What is it, and how do we use it to enhance the customer experience? So universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Right. So very briefly, in the 50s and 60s, it was more commonly known as barrier-free design. It emerged out of World War II soldiers who had a lot of physical disabilities. In 1970s, Robert Mace, M-A-C-E, coined the term universal design. Mace was an architect who had polio and himself used a wheelchair. So the concept was originally based on physical spaces, but it was quickly adapted by the digital accessibility community. Then in the 90s, Mace, along with 9 to 10 other authors, created 7 principles of universal design. So although the origins were in physical spaces, then adapted to virtual spaces, these principles can also be applied to our policies, our procedures, and our processes. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. And one of the things I want to encourage you to do is using the handout that was provided. Again, on the website for this conference, at the top, there's a page where you can register and a page where you can view the archives. And under there, if you scroll to my presentation, you'll see a link for a handout, and this is provided for you. This is just a helpful worksheet. So if you want to do it as I'm presenting, it just asks you questions to think of, is there a current barrier that's already there? Or is there a project that's just getting started and you're suddenly, oh, that could be a barrier, right? You can jot it down. And the real hope of this worksheet is that when you leave here, the sheet might not be filled out, but you'll be able to fill it out and have an immediate action plan of how you, based on these principles of universal design, can take action to help have change made in your workplace. And don't worry, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how do you do that depending on what your role is where you work. So we're going to go through each of the principles, and there's going to be two examples of how it could look. There's also going to be an example of when it might not be the best. So like kind of a what not to do. So principle one is all about equitable use. Equitable use is about making things that are useful and marketable to people with all different abilities. So making sure that people can have the same experience, preferably an identical experience, but if it's not identical, then equivalent, right? That you don't have to segregate or stigmatize users, that they have the same privacy, right? Everyone gets the same privacy, and that the design is appealing, right? So an example, here is a picture of the inside of, we're calling it a bank, right? So there are 3 teller stations in a row. The counters are all the same height. On the far left and the far right, the customers are standing, right? One customer is talking to a bank teller who is seated. In the middle, there's a customer seated in a wheelchair talking to a teller who is standing. What's important to note is that all the counters are the same height and everybody can easily see over them, whether they're seated or standing, right? So nothing has to be changed to make this accessible to the most people. Now, of course, we could do things like add a chair at the station. So if somebody can walk up to the station but needs to sit while being helped, right? Another thing to notice is between each station, there's privacy walls. So the person who uses a wheelchair isn't put in a separate area where they might have less privacy. Here's an example of what not to do. So this is the outside of a building. It is not, in fact, the Washington Capitol buildings, which look very similar. It's that architectural style. This is a bunch of cement stairs. And then at the very top are 2 doors and a bunch of the cement columns. And in the middle of the stairs is a sign that says disabled entrance in the back. Well, this building was definitely not built with accessibility in the forefront, okay? Because if it were, well, one, the ramp would be in the front, right? Because now we're segregating people. We're saying if you cannot use stairs, you have to use the back entrance. And where are the railings, right? How far away from the doors does somebody have to go just to use a railing? Right? That's pretty far too. Easy fix for this. It might be expensive, but in regards to you don't have to rebuild the stairs. There are wheelchair lifts you can add. People might have seen this in houses, right? Where you have a chair that goes upstairs in a house. Same concept, but for outside stairs. The wheelchair can roll in, or it has a bench that folds down for people who can walk into the lift and it brings them up, right? Also, maybe put some railings in the middle so people don't have to walk all the way to each side. Another example of what you could do, I learned this recently, that unless you know how to write code, PDFs are incredibly hard to make fully accessible for people who use screen reader technology. So instead, unless you know how to do that code or have somebody who can, make the flyer, the manual, whatever, in PowerPoint, where it's a little easier for people to learn how to make things accessible. Okay? So those are just some quick, easy things that you can do. Let's talk about principle 2. This is all about flexibility in use, right? This is about options, making sure there are multiple ways to use or consume products and services, that people have choices, that both people who are left or right-handed can use it. I'm a lefty, so I will tell you that is a big deal. Um, that the design facilitates accuracy and precision, right? It helps people to get it right the first time. And that can be adapted to the customer's pace. So if they need to slow down or they want to go faster, for example, training videos that many of us state employees have to take, where we can actually speed up how fast the audio is. For those of you who didn't know, you can speed up your training videos. So let's see some examples. For example, a great example is asking people, how do you want to get information from us? Do they want an in-person meeting? Is that how they do best? Do they want a phone call or an email or maybe a text message if that's possible? Right? These are all options and they take into account the different needs of people. Now, I understand that depending on the type of business we do, we might not be able to use some of these. For example, text message. Not every government entity can use text message or even emails, but there's still options. Or maybe somebody says, can you please email me and also text me, right? Or, can you give me a call and send me a letter in the mail, right? Options are always good. How about an example of what not to do? So I'm going to give you folks an actual scenario to help you understand about, especially this lack of option. So the scenario is you need to submit a claim to an insurance company for reimbursement, right? So we're going to talk about, dental, medical, vision, something like that. So you go to the website, you spend over 5 minutes trying to even find the information on how to submit a claim. You don't find it. So you're like, okay, I need to contact someone. Takes you another 1 to 2 minutes to even try to find out how to contact someone. Finally, you figure it out. You send the question electronically through the website. You get a reply via email. Looking good so far. You read the reply and they say, oh, you have to physically mail the invoice. No way to submit it electronically. So if you're like me and you have some trouble sometimes with executive functioning, which is starting and finishing tasks and remembering to do stuff, this is all that I would have to do to send that in. I have to find an envelope. I have to find a photocopier because I do not want to send them my only copy of the invoice. I need a printer with ink that will actually connect to my printer because I have to write a letter explaining that I need a reimbursement. I need to find a stamp or I have to find a way to get to the store to buy a stamp because online you can only buy a book of stamps. And I don't want to spend that much money. I need to remember to photocopy the invoice. Again, don't want to lose my only copy. Then I have to print out the letter, put all of this in the envelope, address and stamp the envelope. And the big thing is, remember to put it in the mail because that thing will live in my purse for weeks. There was literally no choice in methods, right? Absolutely no other way for me to submit this information. That is definitely not accessible. I forgot to hit click. I apologize. Everything on this slide was what I just said out loud. All right, how about another example of what to do? This is a screenshot from the beginning of a training that the staff at Department of Licensing need to do. And I'm going to give a huge shout out to Kendi Doolin, the Senior E-Learning and Curriculum Development Specialist at DOL, because they came up with this. So at the top, it says, choose your learning experience. And then there are instructions. It says, select a podcast to listen to the content with support of a captioned video. Select visual for an interactive experience with real life scenarios. Then it says, for screen readers, we recommend the podcast experience for the most effective navigation. And then the last bullet point says, you only need to complete one experience to complete the course. And then there are two very large buttons. One says podcast, one says visual. This is amazing. We now have learning options, right? So the customer, which in this case are employees of the agency, can determine for themselves how they best learn and how they could best learn this material. We also let people know who may use screen reader technology, which option might be the best for navigation. Still up to them which one they want to use, but we let them know. The content is the same. It's just that how they learn it is different. Lots of ways this can be applied. Think about all the policies employees need to read and sign agreement for. Policies are written in legal language, right? Now, think about to pass the GED, right? The General Education Diploma Test. You typically need an average of a ninth grade reading level. How many policies at our agencies and businesses are actually written at a ninth grade reading level or under? So, how many of our employees are truly understanding those policies they're signing, yet they're being held accountable for them? So, yes, have the policies, have the legal language, but you know what? Provide a plain language version that explains what that actually means. What does this mean that they're saying they're going to do or not do? Right? That's what this is about, is providing those options so people can consume the material in the way that they can best understand and use it. Principle 3, that's all about simple and intuitive use, right? The customer being able to easily understand the product or the service, that they don't need advanced training, they don't need advanced knowledge or language skills or concentration level. So we eliminate complexity if it's not necessary, right? We're consistent with what the user is expected to do or know. Think left-hand navigation menus, right? Everyone knows, oh, use the left-hand menu because it's consistent, right? Things like that. So an example, here we have two images, right? The one on the left has the word push in English, and then it shows a graphic of a person physically pushing a door. And the door is even curved, so it's very clear that they're pushing it. The graphic on the right says pull, and it shows a person pulling a handle of a door, and the door is curving towards them. Now, not visible on this, but there is also Braille on these signs, right? So this is using words and images. You don't need to know how to read English to be able to understand this image, right? That's the type of thing. It's making it very simple and intuitive and easy when at all possible. How about what not to do? So on this slide, we have an incredibly complex flow chart. I cannot even count the number of boxes, but I'm going to say over 100, right? With all different lines and arrows and colors. The boxes are different sizes, all of that. I'm dizzy just looking at it. Basically, don't do this. Flowcharts are great, but if you're finding your flowchart is this in depth, might be time to break it down into smaller digestible chunks, right? Steps, each step, or each section could have its own flow chart, right? This is way too complex. Another example. So on this slide, we actually have screen grabs from this conference's website, right? So shout out to the folks who developed this website. We have one that grabs a section that says about the conference, and it has a couple paragraphs just about the conference. And then at the bottom, it actually has an email address. So immediately you can reach out to somebody. But what's really cool is it also has an FAQ. So there's a whole list of questions that would commonly be asked, and you can expand that to see the answer. This is fantastic, right? So now, one, I'm empowered. As a customer, I am empowered to find my own answer. And who doesn't like that feeling of figuring it out for themselves, right? And it also means that the customer service folks, when they do get a call, it's actually probably going to be a little more complex because the person's going to have tried these, right? So you're reducing the call volume, meanwhile, allowing your people to spend more time when a help call does come in. So, principle 4. So, quickly, principle 4 has to do with sensory abilities, right? These have to do with your senses, especially hearing and vision, right? So this is about perceptible information. Can you perceive it, right? So does it communicate the necessary information effectively? Regardless of sensory abilities, can most people understand it? So using pictures, verbal messaging, tactile tactile messaging, that information in multiple ways, right? Making sure it's legible, it's easy to find, using different types of examples, right? And that no matter the type of technology you use, you can still interact. So an example of that, here we have the public facing websites for DSHS. On the first side is a picture, it's a screen grab of what the homepage looks like on a desktop browser. So like on your laptop or your computer, right? So across the top horizontally are multiple boxes that will link you to different sections. Right under the boxes, there's a news alert. Now the other picture is a screen grab from the mobile website. It has the same information, it's just presented slightly differently. Now the news alert is at the top, and instead of boxes horizontally on your screen, the options are vertical, right? Because scrolling vertically up and down on a phone makes a lot more sense than scrolling side to side on a phone. What about what not to do? So I was given permission to use this example, and we're going to talk about auto captioning. So auto captioning is when you go into a Zoom or a Teams meeting and you just turn the captioning on, right? And the computer, the AI does it. So I have a friend who is deaf and they can read lips. So they don't always need an ASL interpreter. And there's been times where they were told, well, we have auto captioning for a meeting and you appear to be doing fine. So that's good enough. Yeah, just listen. No, it's not good enough. If someone is deaf, hard of hearing, or has a similar disability, you don't get to tell someone, I don't get to tell someone when it's good enough. If they say, I'm fine with auto captioning, okay. But I don't ever get to tell someone that because I think they're doing fine. If somebody has an accommodation for an ASL, which is American Sign Language, Kelly here is showing you folks all what that is, or CART, CART, which stands for Communication Access Real-Time Translation. That means that essentially there is a human assisting the captioning. So they're making corrections in real time to ensure those captions are accurate. We have a CART captioner here with us in the room today. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Auto captioning makes many mistakes, right? The more jargon, acronyms, accents, speech impairments. I have a list. Some of you may have noticed. There are many times with auto captioning when I say my name is Sarah and the auto captioning puts it with an F as in Frankenstein, not my name. Remember, I have a dinosaur named after me, the Triceratops. Okay, but I digress. So here's an actual example of auto captioning gone very wrong and a very important meeting in context, right? So the example I'm going to show you actually happened in a meeting I was in. So imagine you don't know what's being said, right? You can't hear what's being said. You're relying solely on the captions. And this pops up. Sarah is God and must be followed. Now, huge boost to my ego, right? I was like, well, okay, like I'm cool with that. But not helpful when it's in a meeting about, your expectations on the job, when what really was said was, you, Sarah, UCERA. You, Sarah is law and must be followed, right? Completely different meaning. If there was not CART captioning, somebody relying solely on auto captions is going to be like, what's going on, right? So that's an example of what not to do. Another quick example of other things to do, giving instructions verbally and visually. Have pictures available, diagrams. If you're in person, turn the computer monitor and show the customer the web page so they can see where to go. Right? Make sure staff have training on communicating in a variety of ways. Remind them it's okay to slow down and ask open-ended questions to check for understanding. Maybe have laminated sheets with images that you commonly might need to show customers. Provide a list of the open-ended questions employees could ask to check for understanding, right? All of that is going to help give information in different ways. All right, principle 5, tolerance for error. This is all about minimizing the changes or the chances that something bad will happen, right? We don't want bad things to happen. And they're going to happen, but this is minimizing that, right? So we give warnings or error messages. We have fail-safe features. We add in features if you're working on an assembly line that don't allow for you to go onto what we often call autopilot to reduce errors, right? Things like that. So this is a screenshot from a Word document. I have a feeling we're probably all very familiar with this. When you're typing in a Word document and you hit close, and if you haven't already saved, you get a pop-up box that says, save your changes to this file. That's what we're talking about. So it prevents you from closing a document and losing all your work. Now, personally, I don't love how close the save and don't save button are because I have what I like to call fat thumbs, especially when I'm texting. And if you're using a touch screen, it can be easy to hit the wrong button. But that's not the point. The point is they give me an option, they give me a fail safe. You can do this with online forms. Before somebody navigates away, are you sure you want to leave? Right? We see this a lot shopping online. Are you sure you want to check out? Is this your correct address? Right? Those are those types of things. What not to do? So on this slide, we have a picture of a woman walking downstairs. It looks like they're going to miss the next step, and they've already started falling forward, right? They have this very startled expression on their face. So what's wrong with this picture, we might be thinking. So the thing is, these stairs are all a gray cement. There is nothing if you don't have the ability to have good depth perception or even just strong vision, or maybe it's dimly lit, maybe it's foggy or there's smoke, very hard to differentiate the stairs. Adding a high visibility black and yellow striped edging to all of them automatically makes it so it's much more visible, much less likely to miss the stair and trip or fall, right? Another quick example of what to do, 30-day return policy on products. No questions asked, and please pay for return shipping. Many people don't know if a product is right for them until they're actually able to try it out, right? So allowing people to purchase a product and then have a decent amount of time to return it and that they don't have to pay to return it. One, it increases customer satisfaction and trust and loyalty. And it also shows that you have faith in your product, right? You trust your product is going to meet their needs. So then they don't have to spend that money shipping it back. So principle number 6 is low physical effort. This is just what it says, that it takes the least amount of effort possible to do something. Allowing people to remain in neutral postures, using reasonable force to operate it. I'm looking at all those pickle jars out there that take 5 people to open, minimizing repetitive motions, minimizing sustained physical effort, and also cognitive effort, right? Cognitive fatigue is real. This is a very simple one, sit, stand, workstations, right? That's it. Allows people to change position. Other things in the workplace, chairs at customer service counters. If you have a large building, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Costco, have some benches for people. That's a lot of walking, right? What not to do? Quick one is a scenario. There's a job posting for an entry level position, right? Call center. The only required qualification is to have a GED or a diploma. So the job posting was written at a grade 14 reading level. Now remember, GED, roughly a ninth grade reading level. So already, if you are at a ninth grade reading level, you're going to have a lot of cognitive fatigue trying to understand this job posting. And then let's go into the application process, right? So you already have increased fatigue understanding it. Now, so you have to fill out an application. That's cool, right? What have you done in the past? What types of experience have you had? Maybe volunteer, stuff like that. Okay. Oh, but now it's asking for a resume. So first, let's remember that a high school diploma or GED are the only requirements. So what are the odds that we're actually going to get a lot of candidates who are just out of school or just got their GED, don't have any real work experience? What are they going to put on a resume that they didn't put on the application? And why do we need a resume? What are we looking for? Because if we're asking people to do a lot of cognitive effort, and also physical effort, because there's a lot of people where typing is hard. Why are we asking them to now double their information? If we want concrete examples of things they've done, then ask them. Provide concrete examples of the tasks and give them an example. So, say instead of just writing, used a multi line telephone, you could write, worked in a call center, answering incoming calls and routing them to the appropriate department. Right. So, think about, why do we want this resume? Why are we having people, do all this effort? And then a cover letter. Again, high school diploma, GED, entry level position. Why do we also need a cover letter? Are we looking for a writing sample to know that they can, have like a standard level of grammar, or that they can, express a thought in a sentence? Great. Ask them for a writing sample. Give a couple prompts. How long should the answer be? You know, um, but then also imagine if there's then a supplemental question. How do your skills and experience qualify you? That's a whole lot of effort we're asking them to do, right? And it's a lot of effort on our recruiters to have to read all of that. Another example, principle 6, having autofill options. Don't you love it when you go to a website to order something and it autofills your address for you and your phone number? Saves a lot of time and effort and that fatigue, right? All right, real quick, principle 7. This is all about the size. Is it an appropriate size, and can people get to it, right? Can they see it? So whether they're seated or standing, regardless of most average heights, can they see what they need to see? Can they reach things? Can they get to the sink if somebody uses a wheelchair? Can they get to the sink to wash their hands? And can they reach the soap dispenser? You ever see those soap dispensers all the way up by the mirror in front? And you're like, even I have trouble reaching it, right? So, an example, if you're setting up a conference room, are the aisles wide enough for a person using a mobility device and either a human assistant or a service animal to walk on the side next to them? Right? Conference room, dining rooms, waiting rooms. In a lobby, can people navigate between the rows of chairs? What not to do? In this picture, there's a large green plant placed in front of a pillar. It's covering half of a sign that says restrooms. So here's the rhetorical question: which way is the arrow pointing? It's pointing to the left, to the right, straight ahead. Nobody knows because the plant's in front of it. And when you got to use the restroom, this is definitely not helpful, right? So make sure things aren't obscuring what people need to see. Providing different ways to access information. So in this picture, it shows a reception desk, and there's somebody talking to the person behind the desk, but there's also a self-serve kiosk where they can enter a virtual, like a queue, like a take a number at the deli type thing. So we're giving them different ways to get information and different physical ways to access. So those are the 7 principles. And to wrap up, the big thing is, how do you put this in action? Well, I showed you that worksheet. That's one way that you can start thinking about, what are the barriers that either are occurring or that could occur in something you're building, something you're writing. Maybe you're writing a policy, right? And then who's going to be impacted by it? Not just people with the disabilities, but what about the people trying to give them customer service, right? What happens if those barriers aren't removed? Customer trust, loyalty, satisfaction, return on investment, employee engagement. What's the loss here? And then how can it be removed, right? What can be done and who needs to be involved? Is it a manager? Is it maintenance? Is it human resources? And most importantly, what can each and every one of you do here to help remove barriers? Because you might be thinking, I don't have any power where I work. I'm not maintenance, I'm not HR, but you have the power of noticing a current or potential barrier and knowing who to tell about it. And that is massive, right? If you notice it and you say something. So this slide just talks about who you could contact: physical building issues, maintenance facilities. If it's about a meeting room, whether it's virtual or in person, the host of the event. If it's about emergency preparedness, like how do I get out of the building? Safety coordinators. Policies and procedures, supervisor, manager, human resources. maybe your DEI coordinator, and maybe you just want consultation, training, general questions. Reach out to the Disability Inclusion Network. We love to do that. So before we get to questions, I just want to make sure I thank Kelly, our interpreter, our cart captioner, and everyone from your Washington who helped put this on and has been working behind the scenes in this session, just to help with everything go smoothly. Thank you so much. And Talia, please hit me with questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Oh my goodness, where to start? Okay, first I just want to say, here's your flowers, Sarah, because that was an amazing presentation. So
Thank you.
flowers to you. We've got
Oh,
folks.
thank you.
Yes, we've got even Julie says, not a question, but it's a wonderful presentation.
Oh,
Sarah, you're great at presenting. You're clear. You provide many examples, and she appreciates you. We all appreciate you. Yes, thank you for all those very applicable examples. So helpful to really get it, to get what you're saying. And there's so
thank
many
you so
questions
much.
that
Okay.
I just want to say, I'm sorry, folks, I won't have a chance to get to all of them, but do take note, Sarah's name. I know you've got to be in LinkedIn, so if somebody wants to reach out with a question, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think you wouldn't mind that.
And then if you want to put in the chat room, DIN at BRG or ofm.wa.gov, din at ofm.wa.gov, you can always email me there for a question too.
Boom, there you go. Okay, but since we do have a few minutes, I am going to get to a few. So,
Okay.
what are your thoughts on only having a voicemail number where callers never reach a live person for a public-facing service? How might that impact accessibility and user trust? And Anna was also asking a question along the lines, just saying, what's the best way to encourage agencies to make sure that they retain old school methods of customer service, like a phone number or even walk-in
Absolutely. That is
appointments?
oh, sorry. Were you
Oh, no, I was just saying,
okay?
or even walk-in appointments.
Yeah. First of all, yes, it needs to happen. We have what, four generations in the workplace? We have baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and another 2 or 3 years, we're going to have Gen Alpha. We have to be accommodating all of those needs. And there are kind of general generational differences in communication, right? So we have to be providing a way for people to come in person. Now, it might be that we can't have as many drop-in hours, but we can have a more robust way on your website of scheduling an appointment, right? Because that's also going to let you have the most people on the phones, but also people available to do those in-person appointments, right? Phones, I mean, I will tell you, I'm somebody who hates phone calls, right? So I would actually rather call and leave a voicemail and then have the other person leave a voicemail and we just do that. But lots of people want to talk to someone. It's quick, it's efficient, and for some people, they can express themselves better talking than in writing. So it's always good to have those. Another option to look into is having a live chat feature on your website. I can't tell you how much I love when I go to the Delta website and I don't have to call them. I can chat with somebody to get my seat assigned, right? So that's another option. Sometimes we just don't have the resources to have enough people answering the phones, right? So, but telling people in the voicemail, you might not receive a phone call back. So please leave, an email, or we might text you, something like that. At least tell their customers what they can expect, right? Because that goes a long way. You might not get a phone call back, but if you know you're not going to get a phone call back, way different experience, right? So, okay, sorry, hit me with another one. I think we've got
No,
about
no
5 minutes.
apologies. I just want to tell you as you're talking, we're getting tons of flowers in the chat and the
Oh,
Q&A.
thank
People
you.
just loving this presentation. Some are saying it's the best so far. They just really appreciate your approach on this topic and all of the information you shared. So,
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
yeah, I had to throw that in there. Thank you. Okay, real quick, if your agency doesn't use PowerPoint, what other tools are better
Oh,
for accessibility?
yeah. So, I mean, PowerPoint is just a common tool. You can also use Word documents, right? You can add images into a Word document. What's going to be important is that you create what's called alternative text or an image description. When you have a Word document, if you put the arrow on the picture and right click towards the bottom of that drop down menu, it says Alt Text. And that's
Oh,
where you explain what's in the picture, right? So if you don't do PowerPoint, you can always use Word documents if you're doing virtual. If you're in person, you can, it's great to print stuff out and posters, but always make sure that you don't just say, as you can see from the chart on the screen, because not everyone can see the chart on the screen. Not everyone can see what's on page 45. So always make sure you're orally explaining it. You might have noticed in my presentation for pictures that were important, I described, we have three teller windows, left, middle, right, things like that. So if you can't use PowerPoints, that's okay. I mean, paint, you can put pictures in paint. You can add text in paint if we're going to go super old school, right? Or no visuals at all, but then if somebody truly needs one, then you work with them separately and you make one up. It's okay to make something up on the fly as well.
Super helpful. Thank you. I'm going to also just say this. It's a question, but I think maybe there's a way we can post it later.
Okay.
Janice is asking, would it be possible to get a copy of that training podcast to know what
Mm.
they would look like so we have a good reference and example to go on when we need to create that?
Yeah, if you want, you can put my work email, sarah.norton@dol.wa.gov. Reach out to me and I'll talk with our training folks to see what we can do about that and how we would get that. Because I can't say yes or no for sure, because it's
Absolutely.
not my area of authority.
No
But I
worries.
can tell you that I can work with you to find out. So,
All right. Thank you.
yeah,
And then I'm going to go for the gusto. Squeeze
yeah,
one more in if you can answer
got
this
it.
in a
Yep,
minute.
we could do it.
Boom, budget and accessibility. How can everyday employees influence or advocate for better accessibility resources when the budget decision seemed outside of our control? We need to counteract the argument. It's a historical building and it's too expensive to alter it.
Sorry, thank you. You hit a little bit of a pet peeve there with it's a historical building. I get that. Historically, our world wasn't accessible, but we're not supposed to be going by historically. So if we don't make our historical buildings accessible, then we are now saying history is no longer accessible to people. And we're already seeing history being erased. So
Hmm.
right there, end stop. We need to stop erasing history. And that means we invest the money for the long term, right? So I'm just going to say that right there as my own personal opinion. Um, I will say that some things, I'm not a builder, so I can't offer to build, but people forget that there are still grants out there. There are still companies that will donate or give reduced rates for government agencies, right? There are things like tax breaks. So don't be afraid to ask a company, do you offer any sort of tax break? Do you help with this? Do you help with that? Or look for those grants that are out there, right? And there are always grad students who need grant writing experience. I can't say if you can hire them or not, but they are out there. So hopefully
Wonderful.
that was really quick. And Kelly, you have been amazing keeping up with that. Thank you.
You both are amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah, for those answers, for all the examples you provided, and reminding us what equity and inclusion really looks like in action.
Thank you so much.
We are so appreciative of you, and we want to thank Kelly Brenson, our card interpreter. A huge thank you to everyone for attending this very informative session. We do ask that you fill out the survey at the end of the session so that we can continue to improve our conferences in the future. And just a reminder for the following sessions, remember the code to log in, the computer code to log in is capital CX2025. See y'all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.